Are you free Saturday? Or could I possibly whisk you away to dinner? Wait, is that a question? Or are you actually making a plan? It's a definite plan, if you just say yes. My name is Evan Brooks, and for most of my life, I found comfort in the predictable. My days were clear-headed, spent wiring homes and coaxing life back into silent machinery. I'd return before the sun dipped below the horizon, if I could, setting my worn red toolbox by the door, allowing the day's hum to fade. Then, precisely at 7 each evening, my guitar would come alive for 30 minutes. It wasn't a performance for anyone else, just a sacred ritual to anchor my day. A warm-up strum, a new tune I was still mastering, and finally, a melody I could play blindfolded. After that, dinner, spotless counters, and a deep, earned sleep, the kind that only comes from hands well used. Directly across the hall lived Elena Morales, a brilliant 30-year-old ICU nurse, whose shifts danced to a rhythm only she understood. Her hours were as unpredictable as the ocean's tide. Some mornings I'd catch a glimpse of her at dawn, hair pulled back, a determined sling to her bag. Other times, it was noon, when the world seemed to lazily stretch, that our paths would briefly cross. Our shared hallway, a narrow strip of carpet ending abruptly at our respective doors, was our silent meeting ground. She nurtured the stairwell plants, a vibrant green testament to her care, while I ensured every light bulb glowed. Our exchanges were always brief, always kind. "The ferns look so much happier since you fixed the lights," she'd once exclaimed. "And your plants make this place feel truly cared for," I'd reply. A shared smile, then we'd both drift back into our separate orbit. It wasn't exactly distance that kept us apart. It was more like an unspoken agreement to stay safely within our own lanes, a polite boundary we both respected. Then came the day the world changed. It began innocuously enough, a sky with a strange, dull gleam, as if holding its breath before a momentous decision. I was wrapping up a small repair, a simple breaker, a mischievous sparking outlet, just 2 blocks away. Around 4, the air itself thickened, heavy with an almost visible anticipation. The scent of impending rain drifted through an open window, settling in the room like an uninvited quiet guest. I quickly gathered my tools, advising the homeowner to call if the panel misbehaved again. Stepping outside, the first fat drops were already tattooing the dusty surface of my truck. By the time I reached our building, the street shimmered with that unmistakable sheen that precedes a torrential downpour. I spotted Elena hurrying along the sidewalk, a paper bag clutched under her arm. She offered a small, weary wave, and I responded with a lifted toolbox, a silent acknowledgement. We met at the building's entrance, just as neighbors do. She explained the hospital had called for extra staff, then called again, advising everyone to wait until the roads were safe. I for once had finished my jobs early. Just then a sudden gust of wind slammed the heavy door against my back, as if nature itself was urging us inside. Once in my apartment, I dropped the toolbox, washed my hands, and gazed out at the street. The rain, moments ago a gentle sprinkle, had transformed into a relentless curtain, its roar echoing through the glass and permeating the very walls. My phone's weather app screamed a vibrant red, a silent warning that made my throat clench. I picked up my guitar, plucked a few defiant notes, trying desperately to pretend the sky wasn't dramatically altering our fates. At 7, I began to play, because that was my ritual, my anchor. The chords felt solid, familiar in my hands. Then a sudden flicker. The lights dimmed, steadied, then blinked once more. The perpetually unreliable hallway light gave a weak, dying gasp, and then nothing. My apartment plunged into an absolute disorienting blackness. The string I'd just struck buzzed once, a lonely lament, then faded. I carefully set the guitar down, and by instinct, fumbled for the small flashlight in my drawer. An old habit, yes, its narrow beams sliced through the darkness. I grabbed the larger, more powerful light from my toolbox, and ventured into the silent, waiting hall. The entire building felt like a colossal, slumbering beast. Every tiny creak, every distant murmur, was amplified. Far off I heard it, the soft, insistent ring of an alarm that belonged to no apartment. Elevator trouble, my heart leaped. Just then, a door opened behind me, and Elena emerged, a small, steady lantern held aloft. She possessed that peculiar calm of someone who has guided others through far worse. "Did you hear that alarm?" she asked, her voice surprisingly even. I did, I replied, a knot forming in my stomach. Together we moved towards the elevator. On the fourth floor landing, the air felt strangely warm, almost suffocating. The elevator panel displayed a frozen, ominous number. From behind the unmoving doors, a voice, steady but undeniably tired, confirmed our fears. It was Mr. Chen from the end unit. I'm quite all right, just a bit stuck in here, he called out. Moments later, Tasha, our building superintendent, hustled up the stairs, a jingling ring of keys and a crackling, static-filled radio in hand. She explained the city lines were flooded, crews overwhelmed. If we can just get the door to budge a little, she urged, we can at least get some air in and keep Mr. Chen calm until help arrives. I placed my large flashlight on the floor, its beam reflecting off the metal doors. Using a flat bar from my kit, I carefully probed the scene. Elena knelt, her voice a soothing balm, speaking to Mr. Chen through the narrow gap where the doors met. Hello, Mr. Chen. I'm Elena, she said, her tone unwavering. Please try to sit if you can. Take slow breaths with me, all right? I pulled, and with a groan, the metal gave a tiny fraction. Tasha quickly wedged a block in. We pulled again, a sliver barely enough for air to pass, opened. Not a person-sized gap, but enough for words for comfort. I can wait, Mr. Chen declared, his voice stronger now. Rain thundered against the stairwell window, a relentless drumbeat. The building fell silent, save for the storm's fury, our ragged breaths, and Elena's gentle murmur. Counting with Mr. Chen, minutes stretched into an eternity. Tasha's radio hissed, then briefly cleared with a garbled message, then reverted to static. The streets taped off, she announced, her face grim. City says shelter in place until morning, if you're safe and dry. She sent a message to the building's group chat, and soon, phone lights flickered through the cracks of opening and closing doors. When the elevator finally, painstakingly, inched to a level where its lock would release, it wasn't the sound of machinery that signaled freedom. It was Mr. Chen's profound, relieved sigh. We carefully pried the doors open just enough to help him out. Elena, ever the nurse, immediately checked his pulse with 2 swift fingers, then nodded. Steady, she confirmed. He smiled, his eyes twinkling. You two are a fine team. Tasha, arm linked with Mr. Chen's, escorted him back to his apartment, instructing us to stay close to our doors. The hallway felt utterly transformed. The storm raged on. The lights remained stubbornly out, but we, the 3 of us, had faced a challenge and emerged victorious. In the sudden quiet, the raw edges of the moment became visible. Elena turned her lantern towards me, and I saw a small crimson nick on my knuckle, where the metal had scraped me. She noticed it too, her gaze softening. I have a first aid kit, she offered. Oh, it's nothing, I brushed it off. But she tilted her head, a silent knowing gesture that plainly said, it's not nothing. Without another word, I followed her a few steps to her door. Inside, her apartment smelled faintly of lemon, a surprising warmth. She placed the lantern on the counter, her hands deftly finding the kit in the dark. With water warmed over the faint blue whisper of her gas stove, she gently cleaned my hand. That tiny flame, a beacon of summer in the cold, dark world. She pressed a bandage onto the cut, holding it there, counting softly. The gas line's stable, she announced. I could make tea. That sounds wonderful, I replied, my voice a little shaky. The kettle, as if on cue, began to sing its welcoming tune the moment it touched the flame. We stood together in that small, comforting circle of light, just listening. The building had found its own voice in the darkness. Pipes ticked as they cooled. The wind sighed up and down the stairwell. Somewhere, a nervous neighbor let out a forced, brave laugh. Elena poured the tea, handing me a warm mug. The steam rose, creating a soft, ethereal cloud between us. I always keep lemons for stormy nights, she confided, and I always have fresh batteries for my lantern, I responded, a small smile playing on her lip. We didn't discuss grand philosophies. We spoke of the simple, grounding things. The ferns in the hall truly thrive in the Wednesday morning light, she mused. And my guitar, I added. It sounds best when the building is quiet, and the day has finally settled. A moment came when we both instinctively reached for the lantern to adjust it, our hands brushing, then quickly recoiling. A tiny electric spark in the air, a clear line drawn between us, Eventually, she walked me back to the hallway. The rain had softened to a steady, rhythmic hush. The elevator, a silent sentinel, remained dark and empty. On our phones, the city's urgent message still glowed: shelter in place. Check on neighbors, wait for morning. We stood between our doors, a shared night now unexpectedly woven into our individual lives. We looked at each other, not as strangers, but as people who had, against all odds, shared something profound. If you need anything at all, I said, I'm right here. The same goes for you, she replied. I held up my flashlight. I'll keep this close. She lifted her mug, and I'll keep the kettle going as long as the gas holds. The hallway light flickered weakly, tried to ignite, and failed. In that fleeting glow, I saw the border where our doormats met. It used to feel like a stark division. Now in this soft, uncertain light, it looked like a seam, a connection. I stepped back inside, placing the flashlight on my table. My guitar sat untouched. The rain's whisper, the wind's sigh through the vents. I heard it all. I just sat, listening to the building's deep, slow breath, and thought of Elena, her lantern, her lemons, her wonderfully steady hands. That night, a quiet revolution occurred in the map of my life. No explosions, no grand pronouncements, just a subtle shift felt deep in my chest, a feeling without a name. As I finally lay down, the darkness wasn't empty. It was full, imbued with the quiet hum of something irrevocably changed. I closed my eyes, assuring myself that morning would bring light, emergency crews, noise, and a return to normal. I repeated those words, but then I simply listened to the rain, waiting to see what new world the storm would leave in its wake. I awoke to the persistent drumming of rain and the sliver of light that escaped my blackout curtains. Still no power. The room was bathed in that pre-dawn gray, though morning hadn't officially arrived. I checked my phone, a scattering of messages from the building. The shelter-in-place order remained. Crews were battling down power lines. A neighbor on the second floor reported water pooling by the basement door. I sat up, that familiar new shift stirring within me again, the one that had begun when Miss Chan's elevator doors finally opened, and then deepened when Elena pressed a bandage onto my hand, placing a warm mug in it, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I pulled on my boots, grabbed my red toolbox, and tucked the big flashlight into my pocket. Opening my door, the hallway was a hushed, dark cavern pierced only by the faint, unsettling sound of water trickling within the walls. The ferns by the stairs glistened with tiny, bead-like droplets. At that exact moment, as if the building itself had set our internal clocks, Elena emerged from her apartment, lantern in hand, a rolled towel tucked under her arm. No explanations were needed. We simply understood. We walked towards the basement together. The stairwell air was thick with the smell of damp concrete. At the bottom step, a thin sheet of water flowed across the floor from a crack near the door. Not a raging flood, but a menacing promise of one if ignored. We quickly stacked towels to stem the flow and positioned a bucket to catch the worst of it. I found a small valve by feel, tightening it, and the relentless drip, mercifully. Elena held the lantern steady, her voice a calm, continuous stream of conversation that, despite its ordinary words, inexplicably regulated my breathing. A steady voice changes what a room can hold, she said, her eyes meeting mine. It's true in a hospital, it's true in a hallway, and it's certainly true right here on this cold concrete. We made 2 trips with the bucket, emptying our small river into a shallow drain by the back door. On our second trip, Tasha met us, armed with a bag of rags and a thermos. She nodded, like a coach spotting her star players already on the field. Mr. Chen, she reported, was sound asleep. City crews were just 3 blocks away. Could you 2 keep an ear on the lower floors? She asked, while I checked the roof access. Of course, we both agreed. She squeezed my shoulder, a gesture that spoke volumes of her appreciation for our efforts. Then she poured us each a cup from her thermos before bounding up the stairs 2 at a time. The warmth from the drink spread from my hands, through my body, a much-needed comfort. We leaned against the wall, allowing the quiet to work its magic. In that stillness, she confessed something personal. I truly despise the first minutes of any power outage, she admitted. They always sound like utter failure. Machines die and people get frantic. She went on,
But I've learned to listen for the subtle sounds that tell you it's not as bad as it feels. The gentle gurgle of water, not a boil over, footsteps that are measured, not panicked, breathing, slow and even. I found myself telling her about my 7,000 guitar ritual, how it was the one predictable hour in my day. If I dedicate that hour to a song, I explained, it gives me the steady hand I need for the rest. She smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. And in that moment, I felt truly seen by someone who lived a mere 10 feet from my door, someone who had never before asked me a single personal question. We returned the bucket, rechecked the valve, the drip had ceased. On our way up, we knocked on 2 second-floor doors, just to ensure everyone was comfortable. One neighbor needed a battery, which I had, another needed a towel, and Elena had two. We ascended the final flight, pausing in the dim hall where the once flickering bulb had finally given up entirely. I removed it, setting the glass aside. The ceiling looked strangely bare without that tired light's valiant effort. Elena placed her lantern on the floor, its soft glow pushing back the shadows. "I'm going to make tea again," she announced. "Would you like to join?" It wasn't an invitation seeking a favor, but a natural, welcome next step. "That sounds perfect," I said. In her kitchen, the kettle was soon nestled over the small blue flame. The lantern on the counter made the room feel far cozier than it actually was. She handed me a lemon, and I expertly sliced it thin, while she retrieved 2 clean mugs. It felt like a small impromptu ritual. Steam curled upwards, fogging the glass of the window slightly. Outside, a branch scraped briefly against the pane, then released. We ate crackers and a slice of cheese, calling it dinner. She asked how I came to be an electrician, and I told her about my uncle, who'd let me shadow him as a teenager. He taught me to chase the fault until the whole system could breathe again. I recall. He always said the work is half problem, half people. She nodded, a knowing glint in her eyes. "The hospital is exactly the same," she agreed. "You treat the body, but you also treat the worry in the room. I try to bring the emotional temperature down first, then everything else becomes possible." Our conversation wasn't a rushed torrent of words. It was a series of stretches, leaving comfortable spaces for thought to breathe. I cherished those pauses, the way I could fill them with my own quiet reflections, without feeling pressured to speak. She then shared her reason for tending the hallway plants. Having moved so frequently in her 20s, nothing had ever lasted long enough to truly root. The plants for her were a promise of permanence. I in turn told her I kept the hallway lights working because I liked the feeling of people being able to clearly see their way. "That makes perfect sense," she murmured. I thought of her steady voice, speaking to Miss Chen through the elevator's crack, and how steady her voice was, and I felt that I was seeing the person behind the neighbor's smile for the first time. We carried our mugs to the window, settling onto the floor. Rain traced soft, glistening threads down the glass. With the street lights out, the world outside resembled a room with its lamp extinguished. I told her about a house I'd wired last winter, where a new baby had just arrived. The father had held his infant while I tested outlets, and the baby had slept through every click and hum. "I remember that quiet," I said, a wistful note in my voice. She nodded. "I keep a mental list of those small moments that worked." She recounted a night when a family had listened to her count breaths, holding on to those memories like precious stones in her pocket. Time, oblivious to our conversation, simply flowed. It was the kettle's gentle whistle that finally announced another hour had passed. She rose, stretched, and said she'd check her phone for hospital updates. I rinsed our mugs, setting them to dry. The building chat confirmed. Crews had cleared a downed line 3 streets over. Our block would be checked at first light. The message felt like a promise morning would keep. I felt tired in a clean way, the kind that means you did what you could. When we stepped back into the hallway, the air felt lighter. The ferns seemed to have lifted their heads. A faint breeze stirred from the stairwell. We stood as we had before between our doors 2 steps apart, but it wasn't the same. The line between our doormats, once a clear border, now felt like a seam, a delicate stitch holding 2 pieces together. "I think I'll try to catch a little sleep," I told her. "Me too," she agreed. "I'll set an alarm to check the basement in an hour." "I'll meet you there," I offered, "so you don't have to go alone." She didn't argue, simply nodded, a silent acknowledgement of her gratitude. We exchanged good nights with a look and a small shared lift of our hands. No grand pronouncements, just a clear, quiet understanding. Back in my apartment, I placed my toolbox on the chair by the door. I cleaned my bandage and applied a fresh one. My gaze fell upon the guitar. The familiar pull to play it still strong, but the day's weight was heavier. The strings would wait until morning. I scribbled a small line of music on a scrap of paper, a melody that had surfaced as we sat by her window. Simple, like rain tracing down glass. I tucked it under the lamp. Lying down, I left my window cracked. Listening, the rain's voice had softened, as if contemplating its departure. In the quiet it left behind, other sounds emerged. A distant door latch, a faint truck, the gentle clink of a cooling kettle lid. I thought of Elena's list of small moments that worked. I thought of the hallway plants and the light I'd restored. I thought about how two people could live mere feet apart, yet remain strangers, until a single night decided to introduce them. Sleep came slowly, but it came. When I awoke to the unmistakable light of morning, I knew I'd only managed a few hours of sleep, yet I felt surprisingly rested. My phone buzzed with a new alert. The city had lifted the shelter order. Power crews were already on our block. The building chat quickly filled with short notes and heartfelt thanks. I rose, stretched, and pulled on the same boots. I picked up my toolbox. It just felt right. Opening my door, I found Elena already in the hall, two mugs in hand, that same small knowing smile on her face. The light from the stairwell window caught in her hair, creating a halo. Without a single word she conveyed that she had Without a single word, I conveyed that I was ready for whatever came next. We walked towards the stairs together. That night had done its work. It had dissolved the invisible barriers between two lives, offering us shared purpose and a new language to express it. That's how true connection begins, isn't it? Not with a grand plan, but with a dozen tiny choices, each one simple, each one whispering the same quiet truth. I am here, you are here, let's keep going. By noon the sky had transformed from an ominous iron gray to a pale scrubbed clean blue. A work truck idled at the corner, and a crew in bright vests moved with practiced ease. The power surged back on, flickered once, and then held. It wasn't a quiet return. The building collectively cleared its throat. The refrigerator hummed with renewed purpose. The hallway exit sign glowed a vibrant green. Down the hall, a neighbor cheered, then sheepishly laughed at himself. A small release bloomed in my chest, like a stubborn knot finally untangling. Tasha messaged, reminding us to keep an eye out for any lingering issue. I replaced the old, tired bulb with a new one from my box, tightening the fixture so it wouldn't rattle when the air conditioning kicked on. Elena, with careful deliberation, watered the hallway plant, not because they looked thirsty, but because the act itself felt like a promise that care, once sparked, would continue long after the fear had subsided. We checked on Mr. Chen. He answered his door in slippers and a sweater, declaring he'd slept like a stone. He pressed a wrapped candy into each of our hands, a sweet gesture to balance the scales. By late afternoon, the street had reclaimed its normalcy. The crews moved on. A few scattered branches lay like discarded coats along the curb. I took a final walk around the building, listening for any errant buzzes, checking the panel cover for unusual heat. Everything was normal. As I returned, Elena was sitting on the hallway bench, her phone resting in her lap. She looked up and offered a smile, one that felt deeper, more genuine than the polite smiles of before. Does seven still mean guitar? She asked, a hint of curiosity in her voice. It does, I replied. But tonight it might mean more than just the song I usually play. She nodded. I'll bring tea. I showered, putting on a clean shirt that no longer carried the faint scent of wet drywall. My apartment felt brighter, as if the walls themselves had taken a deep restorative breath. I tuned my guitar, placing it on its stand. Then I stood by the window, watching the streetlight faithfully flicker to life. The world, I mused, loved a schedule. So did I. At 5 minutes to 7, a soft knock. I opened the door to find her, two mugs in hand, A small plate of crackers nestled beside them. The delicate scent of lemon, rising from the steam, felt like a clear thought. We settled by the window, in the chairs I usually reserved for guests. I rarely invited. The evening light painted the room with that last golden stripe, making even ordinary things feel extraordinary. I have a new piece of a melody, I confessed, and I want to see where it goes. Play the first line, she suggested. And then stop. She listened. I realized, the way she listened to breath sounds, trying to discern what lay hidden beneath the surface. I liked that idea. I played a few notes, letting them gently fade. The room held their echo for a moment, then released them. Between the notes we talked, not the kind of frantic talk that tries to fill every silence, but the kind that invites air, that allows thoughts to settle. She told me about her life since graduation. 3 different cities, each job paying enough, but demanding everything. She'd learned to move through places, without letting them leave their mark. But she also learned that moving meant carrying little more than what she absolutely needed. She gestured to the ferns. They're my experiment in staying. Then her voice softened. A vulnerable thread. The first time I truly understood how storms made my heart race was on a night my mother was sick, she revealed. And the power went out for a minute that felt like an hour. I was ready to hand crank the whole world if I had to. After that, lemons in a kettle became essentials in every new home. You choose what you can control, she murmured, and you make peace with what you cannot. I shared my own story. About the winter my engagement ended. Not a dramatic blow-up, but a slow accumulation of missed chances, building into an impassable wall. I convinced myself. I admitted that if I kept my days in perfect order, nothing could surprise me. But the surprise came anyway. After it left, my 7 hours guitar rule became my way to keep from drifting. She listened, utterly absorbed, without a single interruption. When I finished, she looked at my hands. Not the guitar. Routine isn't the same as hiding, she said, her voice gentle. Sometimes, it's how you put weight on the right parts of the day so the rest can hold. The kettle clicked in her kitchen, a sound that wasn't mine, yet felt utterly at home. I played the line again. It sounded fuller, as if her listening had given it a backbone. Outside, the street darkened, and the window transformed from a view into a mirror. I saw us reflected there, 2 quiet shapes, close enough to share words. Without effort, the building settled around us. A vent whispered. A distant dog barked at nothing.
Silence deepened, no longer empty. She set her mug down, her hand lingering on it, as if to absorb the last warmth. Then she leaned back, eyes on the faint, undried outline of rain on the glass. She took a breath, as if to offer a practical thought, but then her expression shifted. When she spoke, her voice was a low murmur, not the strong, commanding tone from the elevator, but the soft, intimate one from the quiet hours. This night, she confessed, it's changed what I understand about home. The words that followed were slow, deliberate, as if she were testing each for its truth. This changes everything, she whispered. I didn't respond immediately. Her words landed with a profound impact, touching old hesitations like a gentle hand finding a forgotten bruise, yet also bringing a strange sense of relief. I thought of the boundary between our doormats, how it had dissolved into a sea, how easy it had felt to carry that bucket with her, how natural to face a small problem together. What did everything truly mean? I tried to let it be as simple as it sounded. She kept her gaze fixed on the glass, then returned it to mine. She revealed that before the storm a transfer request had been sitting in her drafts, unsent. It was for a hospital in another city, 2 states away. The offer was good, the hours better, the promised apartment even boasted a balcony. I wanted to leave, she explained, before I could feel the loss of staying, but then last night happened, and she felt a different kind of loss, the kind you invite by walking away too soon. I don't know what to do with that feeling, she admitted. My heart soared, a clean, light sensation. What followed wasn't fear but a powerful realization. Once you name something, you can't unname it. I placed my guitar back on its stand. I'm so grateful you told me, I said, my voice earnest. I don't want to ask you to give up anything you need, but I do want to say that this past day with you, it's been the easiest work I've done in a very long time. She smiled, not a polite facade, but a genuine plain smile that spoke of shared truth. We sat close, not reaching, but choosing this proximity. I thought of hurried promises and lasting, quiet understandings. Was there a middle ground? A place for a small agreement that could truly endure? I was about to speak when her phone buzzed, startling us both. Her eyes immediately shifted, transforming the way they always did when the hospital called. Pile up on the highway, she reported, her voice already taking on a professional edge. They're calling in extra hands. I need to be there by 9. We moved with an unhurried efficiency, born of shared purpose. She stood, gathering her bag. I rinsed the mugs, placing them by the sink with the lemons. She put on her jacket, then took it off, remembering her badge on the entry table. We shared a quiet laugh at the small human mistake, and it didn't break the moment, only deepened it. At the door she paused, a lingering hesitation. The hallway light glowed, the new bulb performing its duty. Without complaint, she looked at me, a silent question in her eyes, weighing whether to speak or remain silent. I'm not asking you to wait around like a promise, she stated softly, but I would like to come back from my shift and not find the door between us closed up, as if last night was just a trick. Tomorrow at 7:15, I replied. I'll play the first line of that melody, with my door not quite shut. If you're too tired, I'll keep it open anyway, and the song will travel enough to be company. She nodded, as if I'd handed her something tangible, something she could hold on to. When the elevator arrived, its soft bell chimed, the same sound that had signaled worry last night, but tonight it signified a path to where she was needed. She stepped in, then turned, holding the door. For a second she leaned forward, not for a kiss, not for a grand promise, but simply to rest her forehead against my shoulder. A small silent contact that spoke more than any goodnight ever could. Then she was gone, the doors closed, and the hallway reclaimed its quiet. I went inside and sat in the chair she'd just vacated. The room still held the scent of lemon and warmth, a faint trace of her shampoo. I picked up my guitar and played the melody. It sounded different now, not because my fingers had changed, but because my perception of the room, of everything had. Outside, the streetlight cast a patient circle on the sidewalk. The storm had cleansed the world, leaving it. I let the last note fade, listening to the fridge's hum, the building's pulse, the distant whisper of tires on wet pavement. Not everything had changed. Not yet. The same walls held the same air. The same day would demand the same work. But the map in my head, it had been meticulously redrawn. Now a delicate path existed between two doors that had once been separate. Now a specific time on the clock meant more than just a song. Now I understood that a single softly spoken sentence in a room could open a passage that had always been there, patiently awaiting light. I set my guitar down, looking at the tiny seam where my door met the frame. Tomorrow I wouldn't close it all the way. I'd leave a space, wide enough for sound, and perhaps for the fragile beginning of something that could truly weather any storm. At 7:15, just as I'd promised, my door was left ajar. The gap was small enough to keep my apartment warm, yet wide enough for the melody to drift. I tuned my guitar and played the first line that had come to me the night before, a tune that flowed like clear water over smooth stone. I let it settle into the hallway, waiting. She didn't come by. The clock ticked past 8, then 9. I placed the guitar down, poured hot water over coffee grounds, and filled a small thermos. I left it near the seam where our doormats met, with a note scribbled on a scrap of paper, for when you get home. No rush. I went to bed, my phone face up, its volume just high enough to catch a soft knock. Her footsteps arrived, near dawn, that hushed hour when even the street seemed to hold its breath. I heard the soft rustle of her bag, the click of her door latch. The thermos cap turned with a small deliberate sound, then stilled. I opened my door. She stood there, thermos in one hand, my note in the other,
Her face bore the kind of profound weariness that comes from carrying immense weight. Then gently setting it down, she didn't speak immediately. She took a sip, closed her eyes for a brief second, and let out a breath that told an entire unspoken story. "Would you prefer a chair?" I asked softly. "Or the hallway bench?" She chose the floor, right between our doors. I brought 2 slices of toast and a small jar of honey. It was what I had, and honey on toast, I knew, could combat the deep hunger born of long shifts. She ate slowly, sharing fragments of her night, the highway pileup, a family needing calm, unwavering work. "There's a certain silence in those rooms," she explained. "You don't fill it, you just hold it." She'd returned with a quiet headache, a list of small victories, and for now, that list would have to be enough. I listened, just as she had listened to me. No attempts to fix, no forced optimism, just a steady present calm, and a warm mug within reach. When she finished, she leaned her head against the wall, her gaze on the seam of our mats, turning the thermos lid in a slow, thoughtful circle. Then she spoke. "I never even opened that transfer draft last night." A flicker of surprise crossed her face. "I don't want to make a big claim on no sleep," she continued, "but I also can't pretend the storm didn't tell me something profoundly true." I nodded, a silent acknowledgement that I heard her, and that there was no need to rush. We let the nod speak for itself, sitting there until the sky truly brightened. By mid-morning, the building hummed with its familiar rhythm. The elevator moved normally. Tasha sent a new note, asking if we'd help devise a simple plan for the next outage. I offered to sketch a panel map, labeling critical circuits. Elena volunteered to write a short guide for checking on neighbors, and maintaining a calm voice when all you can do is wait. We sat at my table, 2 pencils in hand, crafting a single-page list. It contained simple, actionable steps for hands that might be shaking. Knock, ask a simple question, offer water, breathe together, count 4 in, 6 out, keep it steady. We printed copies, taping one by the mailbox. Another we delivered to Mr. Chen, leaving it on his table beside his radio. He shared a memory of a storm years ago, a stranger pushing his car from a small lake-turned puddle, how he'd meant to thank him but never saw him again. People shouldn't have to be strangers to be kind. He pressed a fortune cookie into each of our hands, a tiny ceremony of gratitude. On the second floor, a tripped breaker left a kitchen outlet dead. The woman there, a toddler on her hip, a pack of crackers in her free hand, looked relieved. I replaced a tired Jeep. The little boy, eyes wide with wonder, offered me a cracker, as if I were a magician. Elena crouched to his height, showing him how to count to 5 while I tested the circuit. The lights flickered back on with a confident click. The boy his mother confessed her fear of calling, unsure what to say. Elena gently advised her, "Just describe the sound, let someone else name the problem." I filed that wisdom away. It was true for my work too. Returning to our floor, the day was drifting towards afternoon. We ate sandwiches on the hallway bench. It felt natural leaving our doors a little open. I told her about a portable battery unit I could build, something to power the hallway lamp, and a single kettle if the lights ever went out again. She loved the idea, her enthusiasm inspiring me to build it perfectly. We drafted a short supply list, and I snapped a photo, not trusting it to memory alone. Tasha walked by, noticed our draft plan, and read it. "You've put into words," she said, her voice filled with admiration, "what people need when they don't even know what they need." She asked if we'd co-lead a simple drill next week. "Yes," we said in unison, then laughed at the timing. I felt my old habit of self-preservation, that voice that cautioned, "Don't build anything that requires you to show up. Don't promise a time. Don't open a door you might have to close," watching from the corner of my mind. But then I looked at Elena, placing her mug on the bench in my hallway as if it belonged there. I told her the truth, a truth I hadn't dared voice before. I used to be someone who kept distance around anything that truly mattered, I confessed, as if space could somehow protect it. My gaze met hers. "I don't want to do that here. I want to stake a small claim, and I want to keep it." She absorbed my words, not rushing to praise, but simply placing her hand flat on the bench, leaving it there for a silent count, A quiet, profound agreement. Near 5, she said she needed an hour of sleep before the hospital might call her back for a short shift. I'll be around, I promised. She stood, hesitating, as if she wanted to mark this moment with something tangible. I walked to my toolbox and pulled out a brass bell, an antique from an old job, originally meant for a porch, never installed. I mounted it on the hallway board between our doors, setting the pull cord low enough to reach without stretching. I looked at her, a question in my eye. 1 tap if you need help, she finished, a soft smile spreading across her face. 2 if you want tea. We both smiled, because it felt like a rule we'd somehow known long before we ever spoke it aloud. She went inside to rest. I built the battery unit at my table, a neat compact box designed to quietly shoulder a few hours of light. When I tested it, the bulb glowed with a steady, trustworthy tone. I carried it to the hall, showing Tasha how to connect it effortlessly. You've just made this building 10% braver, she declared. Bravery might be too big a word, I demurred. Not from where I'm standing, she countered, her gaze firm. As the sun began its descent, I cleaned my kitchen, set water for pasta, and then, guitar in hand, felt the new melody taking shape under my fingers. At 7:15 I left my door ajar again, playing not as a signal, but as a shared ritual, whenever the day allowed. Halfway through the first song, 2 soft taps echoed from the bell. I felt the sound resonate deep in my chest. She emerged, her hair still damp from a quick shower, a rolled sleeve revealing a faint bruise from bumping a cart. I handed her a mug. She in turn offered me a lemon wedge for the rim. It was funny, and utterly right. We ate at the counter, letting conversation ebb and flow. She told me she had opened the transfer draft again, staring at it, then closed it, setting a reminder for the end of the week. She wanted to make such a profound choice clear-headed, not exhausted at the end of a long shift. I respect that completely, I told her. And if you stay, I added, my voice steady, I'll keep showing up at 7:15, whenever your day allows, and at other hours when it doesn't. That's my part of the choice. It wasn't a vow but a promise, a schedule I fully intended to keep. She nodded, her gaze moving from the bell to me, then back again. It feels good, she said, to put a real step on the ground. After dinner, we carried the battery unit to the hallway for a quick test. The light held strong. Mr. Chen opened his door, looked up and pronounced it handsome. He then mistakenly gave the bell a single tap, covering his mouth like a child caught mid-game. We laughed, assuring him he'd only asked for help turning on his radio. He promised us oranges tomorrow, and shuffled away in his soft slippers. When Alina left for her short shift at the hospital, she paused at the threshold, just as she had the night before. No forehead against my shoulder this time. Instead, she slid the edge of her doormat forward, until it touched mine. A small point of contact, yes, but it also meant someone would have to actively move it back to create distance again. I watched her go, reflecting on how change so often manifests as something tiny, almost invisible, in a hallway. I cleaned the dishes, then sat with my guitar. The melody had grown, gained strength. It could stand on its own now. I played it once for the room, once for the open door, and once more just for the profound quiet that followed. This wasn't a story of grand declarations. It was a chronicle of steady actions that together declared we were no longer standing on opposite sides. My old habit of holding back tried to argue, then fell silent, finding nothing left to say. The bell, a quiet sentinel, hung between our doors. The light was ready for the next darkness, and the seam on the floor, once a line, now looked like a stitch. By the end of the week, the building had found a new gentle rhythm. The hallway carried the soft scent of lemon and clean dust, visible only when a narrow stripe of sunlight danced through it. The ferns by the stairs stood taller, vibrant. The brass bell between our doors hung as if it had always belonged. The battery box, tucked beneath the bench, waited discreetly, a silent guardian. Neighbors nodded at our posted plan by the mailboxes, pausing to read the section on counting breath. It felt like the entire place had shifted, just half an inch, towards something steadier. Sunday afternoon, we conducted the drill Tasha had requested. 10 neighbors arrived, soon joined by 3 more, bearing plates of cookies and small dogs. I guided everyone through the panel map, explaining the crucial circuits. Alina, with her calm, steady voice, led the breathing count, demonstrating how a tranquil tone could soothe an entire room, using the very same reassuring cadence she'd used with Mr. Chen. Through the elevator door, the children eagerly tapped the bell, giggling at its gentle resonant sound. Mr. Chen arrived with a bag of oranges, placing them on the bench like an offering at an altar. Tasha stood, arms folded, a look of profound pride mingled with relief on her face. When we finished, the hall felt like a blend of a quiet church and a bustling kitchen. People lingered, reluctant to leave. Someone asked if we'd do it again next month. Yes, we chimed, without even glancing at calendars. After the drill, I walked Alina to the corner for fresh coffee. The air still held that crisp, post-rain clarity, even under the clear sky. She picked up a lemon from a small stand, turning it in her hand as if weighing more than just its juice. We sat on a low wall, sharing a soft pretzel. She took out her phone, opening the transfer draft she'd carried all week. 2 emails awaited. One, a yes to a new city, kinder hours, a balcony. The other, a quiet, no thank you, not now. She didn't offer me the phone, didn't ask what she should do. She looked at the lemon, then at the street, then finally at me. I told her my truth. Last week I began. I would have wanted to cling to anything that made my life feel solid, even if it meant asking someone to give up a path they'd earned. My voice softened. But this week, I understand that solid isn't the same as still. I promised her, whatever you choose, I'll still be the person at 7:15, with my door not quite shut. She nodded once, then typed with a swift certainty that showed her hands knew the answer before her mind fully caught up. She sent a message. Not now, not never, not in a rush. She slid her phone into her pocket, releasing a breath that visibly eased her shoulders. It wasn't a burst of joy, but a deep settling, like a table leg finally finding its balance on the floor. We walked back, a bag of lemons between us, silent proof that even small decisions carry immense weight. That night, I cooked pasta, opening the window above the sink. I played the melody I'd been building, giving it a name in my head, Hallways. It was a tune you could hum while carrying a bucket, or counting to 6. Alina knocked once, then twice, our new language, and came in with a small plant, not a fern this time, but something with glossy leaves that caught the light. She set it on the bench outside our doors after we ate, saying it could live there, between our thresholds, like a line that had become a living thing. We stood, looking at it longer than any plant needed, but it felt utterly right. Monday brought the familiar rhythm of work. I rewired an old ranch, a panel from the 70s full of hidden surprises. She navigated a hospital shift that began calmly, then sharpened without warning. We met in the hall at odd hours, sometimes exchanging words, sometimes just a tap on the bell, a hand on the bench. I adjusted my guitar time to accommodate her shifts, leaving my door open, no matter the minute. On Thursday, she came home early, and I taught her the first 4 notes of the hallway song. Her fingers found the strings as if reading a new language she already knew. We laughed at the buzzing sound of a half-placed finger, then laughed again when the next try rang clean. On Friday, a surprising note from the landlord. The building had a small budget for emergency supplies, and would we choose what to buy? We made a list of sensible items: extra water jugs, a spare lantern, a basic first aid kit for the lobby. I added a roll of bright tape and a black marker. Clear labels save crucial minutes. She added a bag of lemon candies, because comfort counts too. We bought everything and stacked it in a clean plastic bin under the mailboxes. Mr. Chen, drawing on his old carrier days, carefully wrote the bin's label in elegant timeless script. Saturday arrived with a stifling, unmoving heat. At noon, a storm materialized from nowhere, briefly cutting the light. The bell didn't ring, but its echo resonated in my mind. The power held. The hallway lamp didn't even flicker. Neighbors glanced up, then calmly resumed their activity. That brief test was enough. It showed me everything had changed. We hadn't stopped the weather, hadn't made impossible promises. We had taken a building that once felt like a collection of closed-off lives, and instilled it with a resilient spirit. A week after our drill, Tasha invited us to a small floor potluck. Nothing formal, she said, just bring what you have. I made a simple dish and brought a cheap folding table from my truck. Alina prepared a soup that tasted like the color yellow, filling 2 thermos. People arrived with fruit, bread and enough cookies to prove that some comforts need no reason. We ate in the corridor as evening faded, the lamp over the bench casting a warm, unwavering circle of light. This time, I played the hallway song softly, a gentle hum woven into the background of conversation. Nobody clapped. They didn't need to. The song had become part of the very fabric of our shared space. Later, as plates were stacked and the bell sat silent, as the building settled into sleep, Alina and I stood alone by the plant between our doors. She slid her doormat forward, carefully, until it met mine, edge to edge, without a seam. It was a subtle shift in the hallway's physical landscape, but a monumental one on the map of my heart. I didn't make a speech. I simply reached for her hand, and she let me take it. It was not a first anything. It was a continuation, a deepening. We haven't merged our lives into one singular existence. She still leaves for her shifts, at hours that baffle anyone outside her profession. I still climb ladders, my truck laden with the parts you're grateful to have when a job throws a surprise. We still miss each other in the middle. Sometimes the bell makes the 2 taps that mean tea, and we can't always answer, but on the days we can, the kettle sings, and the window fogs, and the hallway plant leans slightly towards the sound of our voices. On the days we can't, I play the first line of the song, with my door ajar, and the melody travels far enough to make the space between our doors feel like a single room. The transfer email still exists in her history, a fork in the road she chose not to take for now. We don't pretend that life won't present us with other forks. We don't need to. We have a way to choose. It looks like a small brass bell, a list by the mailboxes, a habit at 7:50. It looks like a red toolbox by the door and a bag of lemons on the counter, and the old fear that once resided in me. It's set a little farther back from the front of the room. It looks like her hand on my sleeve as we pass in the morning, and the way she listens, truly listens. When I say the day asked a lot, and I'm still sorting it out. One night, a soft rain returned, tapping at the windows with a sound I now knew intimately. We stood at the open stairwell, breathing in the air that always felt cleaner, sharper after a storm. The hallway light held, unwavering. The plant lifted its glossy leaves. Miss Chen's radio played an old song, a volume that made it both his and ours. She leaned her head against my shoulder. That same quiet gesture from that first night. She spoke the words that truly shifted the ground beneath us. I told her I'd written a final line for the hallway song. She asked me to play it. I did. The note hung in the air for a long shared moment that felt infinite. I don't know if this is the part of the story where people expect me to say forever, but I can say something truer for me. The night the power went out, I believed I'd just get my work done, stick to my routine, and wake up to normal. Instead, I learned that normal can be so much better than it was, if you simply allow it. We didn't become different people. We became people who reach across a seam, and who keep on reaching. When I lock my door at the end of the day, I leave it almost closed, just enough for the room to breathe. When she boils water for tea, she pours an extra mug, leaving it on the bench for the next set of storms will inevitably return, but the air after them will always be good, and what they leave behind, that now is ours to keep.